Good day. My name is Bernadette McDonald, and I'm your host today of What is Your Real Name? Affiliated with the group AACDQ Quebec Adoptions. Today, our guest is an author, and he has written a memoir, The Gift Best Given, by Edward de Gangi. So, I understand that your story has a few pinnacle moments, I guess you could say. Did you feel that at the time when you found out you were adopted, it was set up for the what ifs?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. I was adopted at birth. I came home with my adoptive parents the day after I was born. My mother received direction, and this goes back to 1948, so a very
different era.
different era from what we experience now. And her direction from the doctor was just hold your baby and keep telling him that you're my wonderful adopted baby and I love you.
Beautiful.
I apparently did that until I was about 2 years old and then didn't do it anymore. Okay. And honestly, I have no recollection of those first 2 years.
Okay.
So it wasn't until sometime, probably I may have been 6 years old, 7 years old, she made kind of an awkward statement one day when I was about to go out and play with friends. And she said, well, somebody may tell you you're not ours, but don't listen to them. That's okay.
How did you feel about that? Like, what do you do with that information?
Well, it was kind of an awkward thing because I wasn't quite sure what she meant. So I'm sure I stood there for a minute puzzled, and then I did what every kid does. I said, can I go out and play now?
Exactly.
Yeah. And just, I stored it away, but it never really troubled me. When I was 7, my family went to Europe for a couple of weeks, and my parents visited an orphanage in Paris.
Okay.
That too was kind of confusing, and I said, what are we going to an orphanage for? And well, wouldn't you like to have a little sister?
Okay, so...
And my first thought was, well, why don't you just make one?
Yeah.
And then my other thought was, I'm having a pretty good life just the way it is. I could do without a little sister. Don't mess with it.
There you go. Well, I have to add to that a little bit. I tried to send my baby brother back because my mother promised to come home from the hospital with a sister.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, so it's, as it turned out, they could not adopt a child in France.
Okay.
So I lived the rest of my life as an only child somewhere in the years probably before my teens. My parents had a fireproof box,
Yeah.
that you put all your important papers in. And I think one day when they were out, I decided I would go and see what was in the box.
Yeah.
And found 2 documents. One was my amended birth certificate, which said certificate of birth by adoption. I was adopted in New York City.
Okay.
And the other one turned out to be my adoption decree, even though I didn't really understand it at the time I saw it.
How old were you when this happened?
Before my teens.
Okay.
And I looked at it. I pretty well understood. It sort of made sense out of that first awkward statement that my mother had made years before, but I didn't question it. I never asked about it. My parents never brought it up, so I kind of went through life thinking, if you're not talking about it, then I guess I'm not going to question it. And I had a wonderful childhood. I had a great life, and those were my parents.
Was there any point at that time when you almost brought that question up or asked them, what does this mean?
I don't think I did.
Okay.
There were the occasions, and it was very occasional, where I think, gee, I wonder who my mother was.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were the occasions when I said, you know, what mother would give up a kid like me?
Exactly.
but I just sort of muddled on with my life, and I had a very good life. It was never discussed. My dad passed away in the 1970s.
Okay.
My birth mother passed away in the 1980s. And it was not until the year 2017, so this is 30 years
Quite
later,
some time, yeah,
that I chose to finally plot ahead and see what I could find.
What brought that around? Was it just...
I think it was a number of things. You know, number one, my wife's parents had come down here to North Carolina to live nearby, and they arrived in kind of compromised health. Mm-hmm. And over, you know, an unfortunately short period of time, both of them passed away. They had come down here from New Jersey, so in February of 2017, we were in New Jersey to inter my father-in-law's ashes. Mm-hmm. And coincidentally, my adoptive mother's family was buried in a nearby cemetery. You know, she came from Ukraine, or their family did.
Okay.
And there was a Ukrainian enclave which had quite a large cemetery there, and we stopped and went there just to visit. And I was standing over my grandparents' grave and said, gee, I really should know more about my background, exactly. Thinking in terms of my adoptive family.
Yeah.
And when we came back to North Carolina, I went to the local library, you know, knowing the little bit I did name-wise, got on Ancestry.com, and I was very surprised how quickly information started coming.
What was your most surprising part of getting the Ancestry?
Yeah. And I had a moment when I said, well, if it's that easy, I wonder what I would find out about my biological background. Mm-hmm. And I went back home, I opened up that box which we had inherited, the fireproof box, took out the document, and my parents' names were there, their attorney's signature was there.
Wow.
And there was a signature of a person who I didn't recognize. As it turned out, that was my biological mother.
Okay.
I zipped back to the library, typed the name in, and was greeted with a flood of information.
Yeah.
And the first piece that I opened up, and it was just random, was a visa application traveling from the United States to Rio de Janeiro less than a year after I was born. And I wondered what that could possibly be about. Yeah. It was written in Portuguese.
Okay.
But it had her name on it, had her address, which was remarkably close to where I had grown up.
Wow. So
and it listed her occupation as an artista. And I pondered over what kind of artista.
Yeah.
On my next trip back to the library, I went through that whole thing again. What the interesting thing was, the first time I pulled it up, her picture was on it. And that was just like there's a holy cow moment. And I sort of looked to one side and the other to see if anybody was looking, and it wouldn't have mattered if they were. But it was quite something to.
How were the emotions at that moment? Were you excited, confused, upset?
No, I was excited. It's a little bit stunned.
Yeah.
But it was the person who I had occasionally thought about for the better part of 70 years suddenly was looking back at me from the computer screen.
Did you feel a connection even just by looking at the picture, or did it still?
No, I can't say that I did, Bernadette.
Okay.
I can't say. I emailed it to myself so I could have it at home, and when I got home, my wife was there, and I said, "Would you like to see a picture of my mother?" And she said, "Well, we got pictures of your mother all over the place." And I said, "Well, no, this is my birth mother." And so it really was quite a moment. I later found out, I found her marriage certificate for marriage 7 years after my birth.
Okay.
and it listed her husband as listed both of them as performers.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we're narrowing it down a little bit. Started as an artist, and now we're the
Yeah.
performer. And had his name, so I started using that name as I searched. And I very quickly found that the two of them had been performers in the big ice shows of the 1940s and 1950s, ice skaters.
Wow. So
And
follies and stuff.
yeah, she had been in the Ice Follies at the time that I was conceived, actually. And then the two of them met when they were both performing with Holiday on Ice in the 1950s. And with that information, I Googled a little bit farther, and I came up with a post from an antiques dealer down in Georgia who said she had purchased a box of memorabilia from somebody she had no idea, didn't know who it was, didn't know why it was for sale, and but bought it because it was a glamorous person from a glamorous age. And there were probably half a dozen pictures of my birth mother there.
Wow.
A copy of her first professional contract, a copy of her middle school diploma.
Wow.
And I said, holy cow, but she had purchased it several years before. And my first thought was, if she's a dealer, she bought it, she parted it out and sold it all.
Yeah.
But I went on Facebook and I looked and I found the person who there were several people with the same name.
Yeah.
But this one was an antiques dealer and she was in Georgia. So I said, must be it. And I messaged and I got a message back, and she said, well, yes, I'm the right person. Yes, I've still got the materials.
Wow.
I'm very busy right now. Can I get back to you in a little while?
Yeah.
And I sat by the computer.
Absolutely.
I waited for about 7 days, and then nothing came back. And I finally messaged her again, and I said, the person whose things you have is my birth mother. Would you please call me when you have a chance?
Yeah.
And within 5 minutes, the telephone rang, and she said, I am so sorry, I forgot all about it. She said, we do have it, and she said, you need to come here. And you can bet within a week or so, we were in the car and on the way to Atlanta to meet her. And we met her husband. They came to our hotel. And she walked in with this big carton of promotional materials and scrapbooks. And
wow, isn't that wonderful?
And things like that. And, we spent several hours with them going through them. And I was starting to make some notes. And her husband asked, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm making notes, because I'm thinking, there's some people here who might have known her.
Yeah.
So you don't need to make notes. All of this belongs to you. We've just been holding it.
Wow. Oh, isn't that lovely?
They just gave it to us. It was such a generous thing.
Okay, now I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you skate?
A lot of people have asked me that. And when I was a kid, I used to ice skate. I was not very good, and I blamed it on weak ankles.
There you go.
Which I think was everyone's excuse back then. As it is, though, my son, who's 30 years old, is a quite accomplished ice hockey player.
Wow, so that's a lot of talent in skating. You have to have...
And his girlfriend of 5 years teaches figure skating.
Wow.
So it's, so I think it's come full circle. Somehow there was something in the air or in the genes that, that brought skating back.
Definitely. Have you seen pictures of your biological father?
Well, that was kind of interesting. I did the typical genealogy type stuff in searching for my mother.
Mm-hmm.
As with that infrequent curiosity as I grew up about who my mother was, there was not a single time that I recall wondering who my father was. But before I began my search in 2017, at Christmas of 2016, I bought 2 DNA kits. One for myself, one for my wife.
Yeah.
The one for her because she's always hard to shop for. The other one for me was purely to find out what my ethnicity was. My adoptive parents, my father his family came from Sicily, and my mother from Ukraine. So that was always my identification. But I said, well, let me find out for sure.
For sure. Yeah.
And, with the Christmas rush, I kept on getting emails from Ancestry saying, we're really busy. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until May of 2017, so this was
Wow,
4.5 months later or so, that my results finally came in, and I checked the ethnicity, and there was no Sicilian there.
Darn.
I was about 50% Eastern European, about 30% Ashkenazi Jew.
Wow.
And then give or take 20% of Northern European and Great Britain. And that was all interesting. The Eastern European part didn't surprise me because I had always felt very comfortable with my mother's parents from the Ukraine.
Okay.
It just felt comfortable there. On the Italian side, that family was embracing and loving.
That's
They were loud and raucous, but I always sort of didn't feel like I fit. So it just sort of felt otherness, I think, when I was with them. But I then went to my relationships, and at the top was a suspected first cousin. I don't recall the specific listing, but high probability. And by then I knew my birth mother's family's tree fairly well.
Okay.
And the name didn't fit with any of them.
Oh, so it's on Dad's side.
So I looked at that and I said, okay, there's good chance here then that this is on my paternal side. And that was, if anything really surprised me in this whole search, that was the day and the minute. And, the match had a family tree online, and it was an extensive tree. He turned out later to be a Jehovah's Witness.
Wow.
And, so I looked at his family tree, and I knew that his tree did not represent my maternal side.
Okay.
So I looked at the paternal side, and there were 6 sisters and a single brother. And I said, okay, now if this man is my father, is my cousin, I'm sorry, then that one of them needs to be, that uncle needs to be my father.
Yeah.
And I kind of looked at his information, and I sent an email to to this person I matched with, hoping for the best. And probably not 10 minutes later, I got a message back.
Oh, you're so lucky. So
lucky. This whole thing has been about luck and coincidence.
Yeah.
I've been terribly lucky.
Yeah.
And he wrote back and he said, I'm very excited to hear from you. This is really exciting. And he said, your deductions appear to be correct. And he told me a little bit about himself and a little bit about the family. And, another 10 minutes later, I got another email back from him. And he said, I was just looking at this. He said, you have a lot of Ashkenazi Jew in your family tree. Is that from your mother?
Yeah.
And I knew it wasn't. And I wrote back to him and said, no, I don't think it is. As far as I know, these are the people, are Roman Catholics from Poland and Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And 5 minutes later, here comes the message again. He said, then that's not my Uncle Harris. My Uncle Harris has no Jewish blood, and he never left Texas. And I knew at that point that I had been conceived in San Francisco.
Okay.
Because I knew my mother was with Ice Follies at that point, and I knew where they were in August of 1947.
So the Pandora's box is about to be opened.
So I'm looking at it, and a couple of minutes later, another email came. He said, you're more than 25% Jewish. He said, so am I. He said, and that comes from my father's family.
Beautiful.
And he said, my theory is you and I are half brothers.
Even better.
That's precisely the case. He and I are half brothers. Wow. His father was my father. And, and that sort of closed the loop on the entire story.
What, was he still alive at that time?
No, sadly, he was not alive. And quite honestly, I I don't believe, and my brother does not believe he even knew I existed. I think I was the result of a summer romance, and my mother left San Francisco, in September.
Yeah.
Not knowing she was pregnant, and probably,
never even gave it another thought. Yeah.
She never reached back to him, and he was rather an impulsive type of person.
Okay.
He turned out to be at that point between his second and third wives.
Ooh, a player.
He had 5 in total.
So you have more siblings?
Well, I've got Rich, who is my paternal half brother, and on my mother's side, there were 2 half brothers. One was deceased.
Yeah.
Under rather unfortunate circumstances. The other I just spoke to yesterday. We stay in fairly close touch.
That's
so there's a brother on either side that's emerged from this, and a number of cousins as well on the maternal side.
Oh, don't get me going on the cousins. I've got like pages on pages on pages, and I always say to my kids, if I ever win the lottery and I got all these people coming out of the woodwork saying they're family, no.
Yeah, well, these are first cousins, and I've met 2 of them. One who I didn't meet was the first contact I had, though, and when I hand wrote a letter to him just saying, here's what I've found, and and any information you could give me would be appreciated. And it took quite a while for him to contact me again, and he finally said, the only reason I'm calling you is because you hand wrote this letter.
Wow.
But I'm always suspicious. You'll have to forgive me. And I said, I do understand. And in the end, it turned out I knew more about my circumstances than any of them did.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, but when I have some time, he said, I'm busy right now. He said, when I have some time, I'll send you some photographs.
And did he?
And probably about a month or 6 weeks later, I got a big fat envelope in the mail, and he had just sort of peeled photographs out of his late mother's album, and they photographs from as early as my mother when she was 2.5 years old.
Wow.
And continuing up through the point that she had her own children.
Yeah. Do you have children yourself?
We have one son who's 30 years old.
Okay. Do you find that his appearance is that of your mother, possibly, or?
My wife will tell you she can spot my mother's picture because she looks so much like my son.
Okay.
I think women are better at that than men are. I look and say, I guess maybe. So. She can spot it. My mother, in the course of her career as a very young woman, this was several years before I was born, appeared as an extra in a movie that was being made in Hollywood as an ice skater.
Wow.
And the first time we watched it, she said, that's her. She said, it looks just like James.
Wow.
And, the more she says it, the more I see it. I'm not sure that without some prompting I ever would have noticed, but she was also a very petite woman.
Mm-hmm.
She was 5 feet tall and less than 100 pounds at that time. And
well, I've got the 5 foot tall part. That's about it.
The funny part is I'm 6 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
When we went out to California and I met my paternal half brother, he took us to meet his mother, and that was wife number 3.
Okay.
Who my father married after this, after I was conceived. And when we walked in, the first thing she asked is, where did the height come from? Because I guess my father was not a particularly tall man either.
All my half brothers are all over 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
And I'm 5 foot. It's like, hang on. But then when I found my biological father, and he's not much taller than me. He's maybe 5'4".
Yeah, that's interesting. And the my adoptive parents were both 5'2". So I've gone through life asking, how come I'm taller than you are? It's still going on.
Yeah, it's funny that the universe gave you a family that in some sense still fits with your biological side.
It is. I had never thought about that until you just said that.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, to me, it's those little things that you sort of go, whoa, is this the divine setting all this up in when people are adopted? Like, is there really something out there that says
there's a spirit out there? Exactly. Things happen for a reason. I'm not sure what they are, and it's interesting. One day I said that to my maternal half brother. He said something. I said, well, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
And he said, what did you say? I said, well, things happen for a reason. He said that my mother said that all the time. And I don't know that that's particularly a unique thing to say, but.
Well, here's the unique thing. When I was looking for, I'm a twin. My twin was adopted at birth. So I did some DNA, and at the time when I did Ancestry, I was in the process of moving. Well, I moved to a street that the name of the street was Maurice in Lakeshore. Okay. I hadn't found my twin, and at that point I hadn't found my biological father.
Right.
When I found my biological father, guess what his name is?
It wasn't Lakeshore.
No.
It was Maurice.
Yes. And as soon as he said his name, I was like, whoa, hang on here. When I did the DNA test and sent it is when I moved. So it wasn't like I was already set there and this happened. Like,
you're moving closer.
Yeah. So it was freaky to me. Those are the kinds of things that I personally find fascinating, you know, or street names, phone numbers that are similar, names of children that are similar to family when you may not have ever met, you know, but you eventually get that DNA, you know, matching and stuff. See, all of that just blows me away. I think it's
we had a whole series of things with names matching, and this, you know, especially with the brothers. Yeah, my wife lost her father Ted. My maternal brother is Ted.
Wow.
You know, my wife several years or many years ago lost her brother Rich. Yeah. My paternal half brother is Rich, and you know, we sort of talk about the replacement family.
Yeah. Well, is it a replacement or is it just a temporary?
It's bigger than both of us.
Exactly. So for me, my next thing, and that would be, okay, when are their birthdays? Let's see if if there's a commonality there.
Off the top of my head, they don't line up. No.
Yeah. Well, that's my inquiry minds.
Yeah, we hadn't thought it through that far, I don't think.
So, if you were to come across somebody who was venturing down this road, or may have come across papers and unsure as to how to handle it, what to say, what to do, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think it depends on which side of the equation you're on. You know, I listen to a lot of podcasts and participate in a number of the support groups, and there's a lot of hurt and a lot of anger out there among adoptees. And yeah, I guess my first suggestion is take a deep breath, step back, and ask, you know, why did the people who place you do that? Mm-hmm. You know, just, you know, at least assume that there may have been a very good reason. If you're a parent who has placed a child for adoption, or a parent who is raising an adoptee, mm-hmm. I would say, you know, if you haven't talked about it, talk about it.
Exactly.
You know, bring it up because, you know, with DNA, there are no more secrets.
No.
You know, people like myself who were adopted 70 years ago came from an era where people were instructed to keep this a secret. Nobody will ever know.
Well, exactly.
And
It's a family shame, right? Like,
I don't know if we're shame or not, but it's, yeah, there's just no need to talk about it because, you know, they'll always be yours. And I think that's the truth. But no one ever anticipated that, you know, that Ancestry would throw sales and send DNA tests out for $50 a pop.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and there are millions of people every year that are uncovering, you know, once well-kept secrets. And I think it's that late discovery when the secret's been hidden for so long that's hurtful. So it's better to just put it out in the open. Yeah. So I think, you know, talk about it, you know, think about why. And, you know, I think it's the same thing. People ask me, you know, how do you suggest someone write a book? It's just start, you know, do something.
Writing. Exactly.
Do something right now.
So what tools along your journey assisted you the most?
Well, you know, Ancestry certainly did.
Okay.
Civil records did.
Okay.
I try to think, you know, I was blessed with the fact that, number one, my adoption had been privately arranged, so my parents had those pieces of paper. It would have been a much more difficult task had they not.
Mm-hmm. Do you know if there was a veto placed on your adoption? Meaning no contact for you to your biological parents?
No, I don't. But okay. I think the blessing that I was given with my birth mother is that she wanted something special for me. And she had a list of, you know, today birth mothers, if they're placing a child for adoption, review all the things that prospective parents can offer.
Exactly.
She made up a list of what she wanted, and
beautiful.
She miraculously ticked off every box, and that whole process is told in the book, you know, because she was led to a person who knew my parents, and he kind of brokered, for better terminology, the relationship. And she said, I want A, B, C, and D, and she said, let me go find out,
and boom.
And she came up with A, B, C, and D. You know, my parents had eloped 11 years before they adopted me, but you know, my birth mother came from a very religious Catholic family.
Okay.
Wanted me adopted, and within a week after they brought me home, they had gone to church and gotten married on the altar in their Catholic church, and the next day brought me and had me baptized. And wow. You know, and I found out some of these things later, you know, in having known that I was adopted, but never asking. You know, most of the people who could have given me details were no longer alive, but I did have one cousin who was somewhat older, you know, and I finally one day called her up, and I took a deep breath and said, okay, let me take a chance. And I said, hi, how are you? What can you tell me about my adoption? And I expected that she would sort of gasp, and she just started to talk.
Yeah.
You know, she said, well, your mother was an ice skater, and she wanted you baptized, and you were named after so-and-so because he was the one who arranged your adoption. And all of a sudden, just every piece fell together. And, you know, fortunately I asked, because probably a year or so later, a year and a half, she passed away, and there was nobody who could have given me that information.
Yeah. Well,
so again, I think, you know, civil records, obviously, to the degree you can obtain them. Ancestry is a great search tool. DNA, you know, is becoming more and more useful as all of the databases get bigger.
Exactly.
But what I would say there, the interesting part is, you know, there are some groups of people who are prone to use things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fortunate that way, but on my birth mother's side, her maternal family, so her mother and the family beyond, came from Ukraine, and they were peasant farmers, and came from she came from a very large family. They've all perished. There was no trace, and I haven't found a bit of DNA evidence that would lead me to them. I found one woman who, I think, if I'm right, is probably a second cousin by marriage. So we don't even have a blood relationship, and she's the only person on that side of the family. And that wasn't even DNA. That was just sitting down looking for the name and writing lots of letters that never got answered.
Maybe a trip to the Ukraine.
I've some of the databases are now bigger in Eastern Europe, and I keep on hoping. And I'm hoping one day somebody will pop up.
Well, I wish you all the best.
Well, thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And if you can share the title of your memoir again, please.
It's The Gift Best Given, a memoir. And it can be ordered through any bookstore. It's available through any of the online retailers. And I also will send out, I should be careful here because postage being crazy. Within the United States, I will send out inscribed and autographed copies from my website at Digangi, Digangi, author.com.
That's wonderful.
And there's more information about the book there and about the whole story. There are some interviews and some podcasts, so anyone interested in hearing more.
Beautiful story from the sounds of it, and
it's been wonderful. It's been a wonderful journey.
Yeah, and I think you've truly been blessed with the journey you've had, and I wish you the utmost success in your book. And it's been a pleasure. And
thank you so much. It has been, Bernadette.
Thank you. And on behalf of What Is Your Real Name, AACDQ, Quebec Adoption, I bid you a fond farewell. And have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernadette.